thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join us here. The topic for today's presentation is around navigating the hidden costs of turnover in 2024. And so for those of you that we haven't had the pleasure of connecting with Intuity in the past, our primary focus or idea is really this idea around, elevating team performance really starts with understanding your people. And, when I talk to HR professionals, I tend to get a lot more nods from this type of group. But at the end of the day, what we really believe in is this idea that, organizations thrive when their leaders focus not so much on the job, but more on the people behind the job. And what we do is we partner with organizations to help build that peopling foundation. And we do that through two ways. So on one side of things, we have workplace training, which can be anywhere from like a half-day training session all the way up to some of our flagship leadership programs that are really customized to your team's needs. Because I know we've all been there, right? Where we've gone to a workshop, a webinar, or even a conference, and all these ideas, all these things we wanted to implement. And then once we get back into the busy work, it's really hard to, start actioning these items. And so our goal here is really to provide actionable steps to help you elevate your skills individually. And then on the other side of things, both myself, my business partner, are both certified coaches. We actually met through a 6-month coaching program for starting Intuity Performance. And so we offer that individual and team coaching experience as well. So thank you, Mark, for joining us from Reno, Nevada. So another warm place again. There we go. A little background on myself. So as I mentioned, I'm certified ACC coach with the ICF. I've facilitated and trained over 2,500 professionals over the past 4 or 5 years. I'm also the co-founder and COO at Intuity Performance. In my spare time, at least maybe not right now, but you'll likely find me out on my bike during the summer months. And this used to be a picture of our puppy, but now it's a picture of our newborn. So if you hear any crying in the background, that is just Mila letting her presence be known and saying hi to everybody. In terms of what we're looking to take away today, really looking at understanding what is the impact of turnover, and beyond just looking at it as just the direct costs on our organization. We're also going to diagnose and address some of the root causes of like, why do employees leave? And what can we do about, learning different strategies that help foster retention and loyalty within our employees. And we'll actually leverage a calculator to better understand what is the actual cost of turnover to your organization and what can you do about it. And so a few housekeeping things before we really jump in here. We're a smaller group today. More than happy, please, feel free if you want to turn your cameras on. I always find that makes it more interactive. Feel free to unmute your mic if you have a question, raise your hand. We'll leverage the chat as much as possible as well. And so, don't be afraid of jumping in and letting us know your thoughts. But what I do recommend or I encourage is that when we are in a group discussion, rather than telling someone, here's how you should do it, share from your experience. Let them know this is how I've done it. This is what the impact I've seen. And it allows people to kind of take away what they think works best for them. And if you do need to step away, I know, Jerry, you're multitasking at the moment. And so feel free to drop a quick note in the chat. And at least we'll know. I know not to call on you, so to speak, if there's a bit of an interaction or engagement going on. All right. Any questions before we kick things off? Sounds like we're on the same page. There's a stat here that really kind of blew me away that I read at the beginning of the year. And this idea that 53% of surveyed employees said that they're likely to leave their current company in 2024. I don't know about you, but from an HR perspective, I felt this was quite surprising and alarming in a sense as to what are we going to do about this? If employees are thinking about leaving or thinking about looking at other opportunities, then what is it that we can do to help ensure that turnover remains manageable and we're providing the best opportunities for our employees to grow and want to stay and want to be with us for longer term. And so I have 2 questions I want to bring up and get your input on based on your experience. And so I'd like to hear as to, what are some of the top challenges you're noticing that is kind of impacting turnover within your organization? And feel free to either come off mute if you'd like to share with the group, or even feel free to type in the chat and we'll work through that first. And Mark, just come off mute here.
Yeah, I'll just start so everybody else can get going.
There you go.
The thing I think we were seeing kind of as a first is just the fact that people are seeing the industry. We've had a real industry turn down in what we do, and just a little bit of shakiness of we've recovered from two big layoffs about a year ago, and now I think the turnover will be all right. Really, I'm going to continue on in the industry. I'm going to continue on as much as it is the company.
And so some of the impacts are external impacts, such as just the industry itself, the
Yeah.
economy, or even just previous impacts of the organization. That there was layoffs that came up and other things that have now kind of are trickling out at this moment. Okay. Oh, thanks for sharing, Mark. Anybody else notice any trends, whether it be within your organization or within your industry? I see Missy here is staying competitive with salary and benefits in a market is really tightening our budget. I'm seeing a couple nods, got a thumbs up here from Tim as well. And so being able to match salary expectations, especially coming out of a, if I can say, post-pandemic world, especially in the tech space where salaries were quite inflated, I can imagine, I've noticed a lot of organizations are starting to face those challenges as to how do you restructure, how do you manage that? Yeah, professional growth, especially in an organization that's small, right? So how do we help let our employees know what their growth will look like within this organization and help support them in kind of achieving their personal and professional goals, especially when we're smaller or looking to grow from there. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing those. And the other one that came up for me was looking at, if there are any key concerns when it comes to turnover, I'd like you to type them in the chat. I'm going to start moving on here, but type it in the chat. I'd like to hear it a little bit so that we might be able to address those key concerns specifically as we go through the presentation. So Jaresh, Yarashi, I think is how I can say it. And please feel free to correct me again. I do apologize. Here in the chat, she's saying, so people are also putting themselves front before giving their all with companies. So there's jobs that are more likely asking 150% or 175% of any resource. So I think my understanding there is, that there's more work to be done than there actually is people to do it. And people are extending themselves by 150 or 175%, and then it's not sustainable. I think that's my understanding from what you mentioned there. Okay. And so let's take a look at a few of the turnover, like what is the turnover ripple effect, right? So really trying to understand, what are the costs of turnover within an organization, especially looking towards this year. And so when looking at turnover, it can have a bit of cascading impact. So it's easy to fixate on, financial aspects, looking at costs associated with, recruiting. So including both your HR time and also your management time being allocated. You could be looking even training, looking at things like vacancy productivity. So what happens to the productivity of the team when somebody's gone and while we're looking to fill that position. But it's also really crucial to recognize that turnover has a farther reaching impact and can actually extend beyond just the cold numbers on a balance sheet. So when looking at other aspects, that could include looking at, direct financial costs that we've already identified, being able to look at morale. So what's your team's morale when a team member leaves? It can also lead to decreased engagement. Also looking at things like productivity of team members overall. And so your company's reputation and industry can also take a serious hit on how both employees and potential candidates perceive you as an organization. And so when we're thinking about turnover, I think it's really important to think about the financial costs, but it's also important to think about some of the other repercussions that might come up as well. And so looking to shift our perspective from just the dollars and cents to that broader implication as to what is the impact of turnover on your team dynamics, employee satisfaction, or even how it's perceived by the competitive landscape or looking to hire other employees. And so one of the things that really comes up around this is looking at company reputation and employer brand. And so it was Doug Conant here, former CEO of a Campbell's Soup Company, that said, to win the marketplace, you have to win the workplace first. Now, if only more organizations were able to kind of focus in on their workplace and help support their employees, I think it would have a much bigger impact, kind of moving things forward. But ultimately, this turnover can have a profound impact on a company's reputation and employer brand in several ways. And so some of the external perceptions can be, looking at talent attraction. So high turnover rates may signal to potential employees that the company struggles to retain talent or might actually deter top candidates. Other things can look at is like industry reputation. So within the industry, frequent turnover can contribute to a perception of instability or even organizational challenges. And then you also have the customer perception. So, it has an impact on what you're looking at from a service quality perspective. So in customer-facing industries, turnover can have an impact on service quality. If you have an account manager, or you're keeping a new account manager, for example, or keeping a different person that you need to talk to, a revolving door of employees can really lead to these inconsistencies. Can also have an impact on brand loyalty. So customers who observe frequent turnover may question the company's stability and commitment to quality over the long term. And especially in today's day and age, right? Your online presence has such a big impact. And so employees often share their experiences on platforms like Glassdoor. So by having higher turnover rates can actually result in negative reviews and actually influence how the company is being viewed by potential employees, like we've identified already. Couple more here, looking at employer value proposition erosion. So a stronger, value proposition is really vital in attracting and retaining talent. And so higher turnover can kind of erode that. And then finally, looking at things like, sorry, I jumped one here, investor and stakeholder confidence. And so, consistent turnover may be perceived as a financial risk, especially from an investor or stakeholder perspective. And so I'm kind of curious to even get your input here. And again, feel free to use the chat or come off mute. When we're looking at employee morale, um, from an HR perspective and looking at it from a company reputation, employer brand, I'd like to just even get your experience or your comments as to, have you noticed any of these 9 things have an impact on your organization, or even outside of what has been mentioned here, due to turnover? And I believe it was Tim that had mentioned earlier, or sorry, it wasn't Tim, it might have been, anyways, my fault, Mark, who had mentioned about the fact that the organization had had some layoffs in the past. So just curious to hear, how are those maybe layoffs or turnover in the past have an impact on your company reputation or employer brand, if at all?
If you want a response there from me, we definitely saw, Glassdoor, of course, had reviews from employees who were laid off, things like that. Luckily, we haven't had to ramp up significantly, so we've been able to attract and hire new talent, but we foresee that could be a challenge for sure.
Okay. I'm curious, has anyone else had a similar experience, and how might you overcome that, or how have you overcome that in the past? But we can always come back to this one as well. I understand some of these webinars are not always as interactive, and so we will work with the group that we have, and I already appreciate everyone jumping in on the chat and coming off mute. And so we'll keep moving ahead on these ones. A few of the things coming up around, what influences some of these ripple effects is, I guess looking at it more from the ultimate financial effects these factors can have. So when we're looking at the cost of turnover, if you're looking at entry-level position is anywhere from 30 to 40% of the annual salary. A mid-level position is about 150% of an annual salary. And if you're looking for actually a highly skilled position that is being lost in your organization, it can cost up to 400% of their annual salary. And so when looking at turnover, these numbers can really add up to the costs within your organization that you might be facing. And so what we've done here is we've actually put together just a little calculator to be able to identify, like, hey, like, what is the cost really for my organization? And so we recognize that, leadership plays an undeniable role in employee retention. And so studies show, I think this was from Gartner, said, employees quit managers, not jobs. 57% of unhappy employees leave their job because of their manager. And so on one hand, this might be a little scary as to, the higher percentage of people that are leaving being caused by managers. But on the flip side, it also, it provides an opportunity to say, hey, well, if people are leaving because they're managers, what can we do to actually help support our managers in a way to equip them with the tools to effectively support and develop our employees? And so what we have here is I put together a small calculator to help you identify, what is the net turnover cost, and also just a better understanding of, like, well, how much of this turnover cost is actually attributed to management skill gaps or gaps in our leadership skills. And so, for example, I have an example here of 200 employees. Let's say they have an annual turnover of about 18%. The average salary is $80,000. And looking at the turnover cost per employee, this would be about 120,000. So we're looking at using the middle level manager percentage that we were talking about earlier, that 150%. And so looking at the annual cost of turnover within a organization, 200 employees, 18% turnover, average salary of $80,000, that's over $4 million being attributed just to turnover costs, which can be quite significant. And building upon that, now looking at it from a management perspective, about 57% of that can be attributed to poor management, or even just attributed to leadership gaps within an organization. And so within this example here, it'd be about 2 million, we'll say $2.5 million being attributed to leadership gaps within an organization, contributing to your turnover. And so I do want to pause here because I'm always curious to hear as to like, is this number surprising to you at all? Is this something that you've seen regularly and you're well aware of what this looks like within your organization? And I'd be even open to taking a moment if you'd be willing to share some of your information. We actually punch it in here and see what the result kind of comes out to. I don't know if anybody's willing to jump in and try it out for themselves. And just catching up on the chat here. So Diana is saying, sorry for delaying participation. So she's the director of HR and IT consulting at Uncommon in Illinois. Thanks for joining us, Diana. So I'll check in one more time. Any thoughts around these types of numbers or what this might look like for your organization? So Jaya Rashi says that she doesn't have access to these numbers, but they do seem a little bit surprising to her that turnover is that costly at an organization.
God, I would venture to say that I mean our organization, um, most of the turnover happens on the product team. So
Okay.
either a product manager or an engineer of some type.
Mhm.
Um, it's tough for us to kind of figure that. It seems like the teams absorb the extra workload in the interim pretty efficiently, but like it's not something that we can really accurately gauge, just
Mhm.
because they do such a good job of kind of taking it in stride. Um, and then like as Joshua was saying, some of them are operating at that 150% capacity. So
Mhm.
some of them must be stepping it up to 170 or 180 in order to pick up the slack. But um, yeah, it I guess when it works well, it's tough to kind of get a gauge of how much stress that is putting on the rest of the team.
Mm, okay. And so what I'm hearing there is, when there is turnover, the team all tends to step up to be able to kind of take on those extra responsibilities. And because you don't notice the gaps or notice the things that might be going on behind the scenes, it's harder to quantify what those costs are or what the impact is as a whole.
Also, from a leadership perspective, there is a misperception that, oh, this gap has been filled, and so we don't need to backfill this position that was taken away. Oh,
Mm,
everything is working fine. Why do we need to spend more money to get this position refilled?
Has anyone else heard that as well?
Yes, I've seen that happen too.
Yeah, Mark's agreeing. So here we have an employee that's left us, from the HR position, looking to refill that position to ensure that, a team working at 150% is not sustainable over the long term. We're not looking to burn them out. But then because the team's able to step up, now there's less interest in putting money towards fulfilling that new position again, is kind of the sense that I'm getting here.
And Scott, in my
Yes, yeah.
life, it's been more of like, oh, this person left, or they're, for whatever reason, the position's open. Let's use that to save on our budget, whether or not they think they need to refill it or not, but let's save on our budget Which I have to, my question and my concern would be, one, how many times can you do that to the people before they break, right? So they can absorb temporarily, you fill it, they absorb, you fill it, they absorb, you fill it. At what point is the breaking point? And then two, like looking at in a production environment, possibly is there a safety concern? You know, the more tired the people are, the more you put on them, the chances of something happening and things of that nature, either them leaving, them getting disgruntled, them starting a union, them getting injured, all the bad things come when we start to ask so many people so many times to keep doing things more and more and more and more. And at one point, there's burnout and, you know, a myriad of other issues that can come up. So that's my concern when those things happen. But my former companies seem to think that's a great way to save on budget.
All right, then, Missy. No, thank you for bringing up that experience and perspective. I'm getting some nods around here as well. Seems like others have seen something similar. And to your point, I think it brings up a good point around a culture piece, right? As a culture that, you know, within the organization, if people just keep taking on more and more work, that then now becomes ingrained in your culture. And now it's a choice as to, like, is that something that we want within the culture or we don't want, and being intentional around that as well. Okay. And so I'm going to circle back to this calculator a little bit later on in the presentation to do today as well. But moving on, looking a little bit around the turnover costs beyond the ODS. And so when we're looking at, you know, team dynamics and innovation, there's a lot of other important fallouts that might be impacting organization around turnover. And so sometimes there's positives, right? It can bring a fresh set of eyes and minds and new ideas to an organization. It can also, you know, help boost innovation and maybe make a team that wasn't very effective now more effective. And so those can be some of the positives that come out from turnover, from being able to get some newer employees in that might even have more skills than the last employees did. But looking at it from a study perspective, Gallup did some research around this. And what they were saying was that about 51% of employees admit to actively or passively searching for a new job, which, you know, doesn't seem much surprising based on the stat that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. But we also know that, you know, innovation actually helps create career advancement. And data from Pew Research Center cites that, you know, a lack of opportunity to contribute significantly contributes to turnover. So lack of advancement. And I think somebody in the chat had said that earlier, you know, a lack of opportunities to grow within the organization because we're small, I believe it was Yannin, might be contributing to turnover from there. Other things that can come up is, you know, employees worry their jobs are at risk if the company is, you know, failing to innovate, failing to grow, failing to kind of move things forward. As well as, you know, there's a large group of leaders that agree that innovation actually helps recruit and retain talent. And so when we're looking at turnover, there's a big impact from that perspective. And then lastly here, you know, 70% of employees say that their sense of purpose is defined by their work. And so ensuring that you have a workplace that, you know, is aligned with what people and aligned with giving people a sense of purpose can have a really big impact from team dynamics and innovation perspective. And just jumping in here, Missy's saying, so when the only way to get a promotion or raise is to leave the company, it should not be shocking or a surprise as to why they leave, right? And so from an organization perspective, especially when it's small, it's tough to overcome something like that, even if you want to help progress and support somebody from that perspective. But I would like to turn it over to the group and kind of hear from you. Has anyone else had a similar situation where, you know, people are leaving the company because there's a lack of advancement opportunity that you can't provide them? And, you know, were you able to do anything to help overcome that, or what strategies have you implemented in the past from there? Again, feel free to come off mute or even type in the chat as we move forward on this. I'm curious, I know, Yanin, you had mentioned earlier today, that was what challenge you were facing at your organization, a lack of professional growth because the company is small. Mark says strengthening connection between employees and managers. Just like we saw the stat that, you know, 57% of people, unhappy employees, leave because of their manager. The same can be true when there's a strong connection between employees and managers. No, that's fantastic. Missy's saying that it also may not be that it's small, it may be limited promotion opportunities. or not being clear about growth paths or lack thereof. And so not being able to really clearly state to your employees as to like, hey, this is what growth looks like within our organization. And also recognizing that growth doesn't always have to be a promotion. It could be different responsibilities. It could be collaboration on different projects, or it could be a professional investment to help you grow in specific skill sets that are important to you. Mark, and I think Mark's touching on this, he's saying using things like career conversations and skip level discussions can kind of help move things forward there. Okay, that's great. Missy Bright, Missy says, increasing learning development and stretch goals. Yeah, I've definitely seen that with a lot of our clients in terms of, as an opportunity to help support or invest in their employees, looking at learning development opportunities or even coaching as a way of helping them kind of move forward. And Yannen's jumping in here saying that, yes, it's a major challenge. For some, we're able to offer job enrichment or lateral moves, but mostly they resign, which is really costly and also unfortunate. It has an impact like we've seen on team dynamics and innovation. So Yannen's saying, but having a pulse on the engagement level of the team members is key, but managers sometimes lack this skill. Yeah, from the engagement perspective, I know from the HR seat, some things like doing like engagement surveys and things along those lines can be helpful. And then looking at your managers and saying, hey, how can we equip them with the tools or the resources or training to actually be able to invest in team members? And so Missy's saying management training is huge. Too many companies promote and say go. Yes, as a training development company, I'm a little biased to this, let's be honest here. But yes, oftentimes we've come in a team of 30 or 40 managers, or even smaller, to be honest. But at that size, they're kind of like, yeah, we've never did management training before, but we have all these managers and they're not hitting the marks that we're looking at them to hit. And it's like, well, what kind of support have you provided them to understand how do you manage people, which is much different than being a really good individual contributor. But I'll leave it at that because I can spend the whole presentation on that topic. Yes, yeah, that is true. Awesome. So looking at it from an impact on turnover or of turnover on morale, things that come up can look like a loss of trust and stability within an organization. We've talked already about this increased workload, and sometimes it works well, but for how long we don't know. Other things that come up is a disruption in the team and relationship. A lot of times team dynamics start to get close, especially a team that's working effectively. And so when you remove just one party from that team, it can really affect how people collaborate and kind of work together, especially when it's somebody that played a leading role within that team, whether they're a manager or not. Other things include like a loss of institutional knowledge. So departing employees will actually leave with the knowledge that they've imparted and might not be there to actually set others up for success in the same way. And now your team is left scrambling, trying to understand, well, how did they do this? What were they doing? And so, the importance of having SOPs and things along those lines can be really impactful as well. And then looking at things like leadership concerns. So, employees often look to leadership for guidance and stability. So frequent turnover might lead to concerns about leadership's effectiveness or how they're supporting the organization as a whole. And then lastly, the impact on organizational culture. So, departing team members can really have an influence and impact on the culture overall. So in summary, looking at this kind of turnover on impact on team morale, it creates a sense of uncertainty, can increase work-related stress, even disrupt established team dynamics and erode that job and trust satisfaction. Shifting gears here a little bit, we've identified, what are some of the ways that, like, why are employees leaving? What are some of the impacts on team dynamics, morale, innovation? I'll touch again just a little bit on the top reasons why employees are leaving, and then we'll actually look at, well, what can we do about it? What is some retention strategies might be able to leverage to be able to do something about this? And so as HR professionals, we know we need to be comprehensive in our approach to a lot of things to be effective, and that does include retention strategies. And so when we're looking at why employees leave, can be needing more of a challenge, so just natural progression. They're comfortable in the role, they're looking for more, they're looking for a higher salary, as we mentioned. It's another one to be that needs to be navigated. Maybe they're feeling uninspired. This can come from a multitude of things, whether it be the work itself or the people they're working with or their manager. Also looking at this need of wanting to feel valued. And so looking at these things, what I find is interesting is that, a lot of them are pretty intrinsic, like this idea around needing more of a challenge. So wanting to kind of get pushed, not feeling inspired, wanting to feel valued. These are very intrinsic things that are showing up as to why employees leave. which for me is telling me, that really does come back to like the group of people that we're working with, who's managing and leading us. And so that talks a little bit around here. The fifth one is, seeking a better management relationship, as we've touched on already. And so Mark's jumping in here in the chat. He's asking, how about flexibility or hybrid remote work environments or a 4-10 work schedules? I'll flip it over. I'm curious, has anyone, well, what does your workplace currently look like? Are you all in office? Is there a hybrid approach? Have you tried a 4-10 work schedule or something similar in the past? If anybody would like to share from their experience. So Mark says remote.
We're getting rid of our physical office space in July as soon as their lease is up, because if you look at the bottom line and how much it costs and how much we're there, everyone went home. Everyone used to come to the office pre-pandemic. Everyone went home for the pandemic. Afterwards, we might go in 1 to 2 days a week, and the cost itself versus what we get out of it it's ridiculous because we're in Scottsdale, which is a very expensive area of town. So yeah, we're going pretty much remote, although we haven't decided if we're going to do like a co-working space once a week or once every couple weeks or anything like that.
Yeah. And I like the approach, Missy, in terms of like, it doesn't have to be, do we have an office or do we not have an office, but rather there are alternative approaches to getting together as a team. And it could look something, to your point, like a co-working space or something along those lines, so we can kind of get together on a more regular basis. And that's in line with what Jarishi has mentioned here. She works closely in manufacturing teams, and they tended to go like a 4-10 schedule works well, and hybrid work for the office is good. However, there is that importance around office interactions are invaluable. And so trying to find like, what is the mix for you? And I've noticed something similar with a lot of the clients we're working with, and then everyone was remote. Then they started to instill some in-office policies, looking to get it 1 or 2 days a week, while others have actually gone the opposite route and have just completely gone remote and said, like, we're a remote team. We did this effectively before. We can continue to do it this way, and taking advantage of some of those cost savings. Mark's asking here, are people leaving for lack of flexibility or lack of their desired work method? So I'm curious as if anybody's had any exit interviews that they've cited the lack of flexibility or the work method was a reason for them actually leaving. And maybe while I have a few people typing in the chat here, I can chime in. And what we've noticed is that, especially within that transition period, when companies started saying, okay, we want you to come back in the office, that was like the inflection point. So the employees that really felt that they wanted to work remotely left and found other jobs that fit their roles. I'm curious more recently, though, how this might be impacting things, or if it's still something that's coming up for organizations. And it says we had one person leave when we returned to the office once a week recently. Okay. Mark's saying, I used to always align with the bullet points, but I think these things are driving employee decisions on where they work. Yep. No, it is.
It'll be interesting to watch the people, like I see it on LinkedIn, all sorts of HR articles, just regular news articles, etc., about the push and pull of the demand to come back in, and or we were remote, we promised remote, and now you have to move closer so you can work here. I don't think that's the best HR decision. I read an article the other day where one was specifically saying you have to come in, and then they've also promised they're going to do layoffs. And my curiosity is that a guise to cover up, and those that don't move are part of the layoff? Like, because the flip side was made, the argument was made, well, are you going to guarantee those people that move close are not going to be part of your layoff? Because why would they bother? And I get that. That's a great question. But I was wondering, maybe this is how they're going to do their layoff, is see who will come back and who won't. Because so many people were hired, you're fine, and you can be in Texas, like, oh no, now you have to be in Minnesota. Oh, well, that's different than what they were promised.
Yeah. Mark, any comments on that? I see you come on camera here.
I don't want to take this over. I know you have another direction to go. I just,
No.
yeah, we've been through those things that that you're talking about, we went from all our offices, 3 major locations, to only 1 office and at a very small footprint. So fully remote. And, our CEOs kind of vacillated at times where he's seen other CEOs and the Wall Street Journal saying, hey, we're leaving remote, we're all coming back to the office. Well, one, we don't have the facilities, and that's a huge cost. Why do it? But 2, there's concerns of productivity. And so it vacillates back and forth a bit, that whole concern of, I'm going to get laid off because I'm not in that location where they want you to be. That's all big. And then I do have to say that there's definitely rewards for having that. We have a small space in Reno where a majority of our people are, and they have the opportunity to come into the office if they want. There's no requirement. So as a team, we bring the people team in once a week just to meet, collaborate with anybody else that's there. It works really well to have the flexibility, but not the mandate or requirement, because I think that's driving people away.
And what I'm hearing there, Mark, is that independence, right? Like I have a choice. And if anything, it sounds like the people team are choosing to come in that 1 day a week because they want to get together, they want to do it, versus telling them you have to come in, which obviously as humans, we all have a bit of an adverse reaction to.
Yeah, and we're hearing more and more teams say, yeah, we want to get together once in a while, when before it was, no, we don't want to do this. So we've had a couple all hands and things like that inside, and it's really brought a good crowd, and I think people are feeling the energy of coming together, not just being on a screen. So I think having that space or opportunity for people to do that is probably very beneficial.
Okay. No, that's great. Thanks for sharing. And so I'm just going to move on here to the next section and talking a little bit more about retention. There's 3 R's that kind of come up around this. The first one is looking at respect. We know quite well that trust and relationship building are key for employee engagement, whether you're remote, hybrid, or in person. And so building that culture of trust and respect is really crucial. We also know recognition can be really important. Again, looking at it from that intrinsic perspective. Thinking more than just high fives and a good job, rather tailoring recognition to individuals and teams, both intrinsically and extrinsically. And then also looking even just at rewards. And so, how are you rewarding employees? How are you showing them, how well they're doing? And it can be a motivator for some employees and even potential candidates. And so looking at building up those rewards pieces. And so what I'd like to do is I'm going to break into these 3 R's a little bit further to be able to see, like, what does this look like within your organization? And so the first thing that kind of comes up is like, well, how can we build and maintain a culture of respect and trust that make employees want to stay? And so some things that come up around this can be like transparent communication. So ensuring that, there's communication from the top that goes all the way down and people understand as to where we're going, why are we doing things. And, when you're providing that clear and transparent communication, it makes people feel like they're in the know and that they have more stake within how their work is kind of having an impact on the organization as a whole. Also looking even at things like inclusive decision making. And so ensuring you're supporting managers in such a way that they get input and value their employees' input as to what things are going forward. And so it's not just a top-down approach and saying this is what you have to do, but hey, what are the approaches that we can use to solve these types of challenges? And then from an HR perspective, you can definitely build out some supportive policies or procedures that kind of feed into this. Another thing that kind of comes up is looking at, what do you need from your leaders to foster respect for your organization? So again, that's coming back to the transparent communication. It can be even like setting up policies as to, well, how do we communicate as a team? I'll go into the recognition piece here. How do we recognize team members and what does that look like? And looking at things like being able to collect feedback from your employees can really help you guide and understand as to keeping a pulse as to what is the employee engagement level, how are our team members doing as a whole, and help empower leaders with feedback information from their teams from there. So those are a few things that kind of come up around these pieces. Otherwise, looking at it from a recognition perspective, I'm curious here, who has some form of recognition plan kind of in place at their company? Either give me a thumbs up on camera or type in yes in the chat if you have a recognition plan kind of set up within your organization. Not yet? All right, so we're going to look at, I know this could probably be a whole webinar just in itself. This is saying here, nothing formal. Crystal, thanks for joining us. Just looking at some retention strategies for organizations And so right now we're talking a little bit about recognition. And so if you're looking at creating a recognition strategy for your organization, first thing you want to do is, define that recognition criteria. And so identify like what are the behaviors, what are the achievements, what are the contributions that align with the organization's goals and values. And that application piece can really include hosting sessions around helping team members understand what this looks like for them. And building off that, developing and launching a formal recognition plan with different categories. So clearly outlining the process for nomination, selection, for even giving kudos to others as to what they're doing. So some categories can include, examples can include employees or even team of the month, or looking at like how are we acknowledging people for exercising the values within our organization has been a big piece that has come up. And so I hate to use the value respect because it sounds so old school, but if respect is is a value, for example, and you see somebody actually displaying it, well, hey, how can you recognize that person in such a way that, hey, you're actually executing on the types of values that we have within this organization. Building off of that, you want to look at utilizing multiple recognition channels. So establishing how are you recognizing others, whether it's through public announcements, could be internal newsletters, social media platforms. So encouraging employees to share their recognition stories and achievements internally. You can even look at that peer-to-peer recognition. Again, coming back to the values. How can you help support your peers, support each other from that perspective? And then, aligning that recognition with company values can really have a big impact and ensure that you're developing a culture that is aligned with your values rather than just having the values written on the wall. You're actually recognizing the actions within the workplace from there. Make sure it's communicated regularly. Give an opportunity to people. This isn't just something that sits on the shelf. That is communicated the how, the what, and the why, building off of there. And then look at introducing tangible and intangible rewards. We'll actually get into that a little bit in the next slides here. And lastly, assess and evaluate. How is this actually going? Is this having the impact we're looking for? How can we continue to improve this recognition plan to help support employees and make them feel valued within our organization? And so we're just going to check the chat here. I think there's a few things coming up. And so Jarishi said that she has a layered recognition plan within the organization. And Missy just asking us to how do you feel the layered program is working, if you're willing to share. And so I'll give you some time to type in the chat if you'd like. No, Missy, that is right. Putting the values on the wall doesn't make them magically happen and come to fruition, unfortunately, despite popular belief. Yeah. I know one thing we've actually have done this year, and this is just internal to our own small organization, but each week we pick a value or pick an internal value. We talk a little bit about like what does this value mean to us? How do we want to be able to showcase it? How can we help build it? And so we've actually incorporated this into our weekly meetings as just a topic to be able to talk about and be able to share, and then also recognize others for how it's kind of showing up within how we work. And we've noticed that has been a great way of kind of building things forward. And so just checking on the chat here. So talking about the layered recognition strategy. So recognition like respects means different things to different people. So in our case, recognition is often monetary, and this can go through leadership approvals to prevent abuse, or someone may feel enthusiastic about being recognized for a small achievement, and their leaders might disagree. So in my opinion, it can be good to be able to balance one's desires to be recognized. So I think building off that, like understanding how people want to be recognized can be quite important. Where, if you sent out or if you acknowledge somebody in a big meeting, they might cringe at that, while others might thrive at it. So recognizing how recognition might look for different people. No, thank you for sharing. The last R we have here is around rewards. So we're going to look a little bit at, what are some tangible or intangible rewards that can be applied for organizations. And so implementing this types of reward strategy can go beyond like just like I said, the good jobs or the gift cards. And so some things that kind of come up on the tangible side, like we talked about, the monetary side can be cash bonuses or gift cards. It can be anywhere from swag to gifts. Could be looking at the company stock options or profit sharing, plaques or trophies, meals, catered events, travel, vacation, days off, time off, Those are all things that, are really tangible that can help show your appreciation for how an organization is showing up. On the intangible side, there's a few other things that come up around this as well. And so again, looking at that recognition and appreciation, how are you recognizing employees for the work? And how are you showing that appreciation to them? Other things can look like opportunities for professional development. This can look like anywhere from, offering first maybe understanding how do your employees want to be developed individually, or what's important to them from a career pathing perspective. And then it can be offering something as small as a LinkedIn course on the specific topic, all the way up to, being able to offer them a seat at the table within a leadership program, or even within coaching, for example. And so that really falls on both sides of the spectrum in a way of helping invest in that professional development. We've talked about this already, flexible work arrangements, right? Recognizing that maybe not everyone lives near the office. Maybe there are some protocols around how you like to get people within the office, but at time life happens, right? And so being able to be flexible with those work arrangements can really be important and make people feel valued, especially when it's like, wow, I was really supposed to go into work today, but then something happened and I actually had to step up and pick up my kids at school, or something along those lines. So having those flexible approaches can really help show people that you've got their back from that perspective. Meaningful feedback and communication. It's surprising how impactful, maybe not surprising, but surprising how little this might be leveraged as a way of actually helping support employees' growth, right? People, for the most part, tend to want to grow, tend to want to learn. And so when done correctly, feedback and communication can actually really help support that idea around being challenged and wanting to grow. And then even looking at career advancement opportunities when applicable, depending on the size of your organization, and ensuring there's a workplace culture and values that are aligned with what your organizations are looking for. And so one important stat that kind of came up within some of the research here was that 74% of employees aren't reaching their full potential due to a lack of development opportunities. And so when you're thinking about how to support your employees, this might be a great place to start in terms of thinking about, well, hey, how are you looking to be developed? How are you looking to grow? And then being able to identify what that looks like within the organization, building off of there. Any questions before I move on from the 3 R's we touched on today? Okay, it seems like we're on the same page. And so as we're looking to wrap up here, we've looked at a few things. We've looked at the 3 R's of retention, respect, recognition, rewards. We identified, why do employees leave? We looked at the impact of turnover on morale, team dynamics, innovation, and also identified some of the ripple effects that turnover can happen or can have across your team. And so I'd like to go back to the calculator that I brought out earlier. And so again, just using the numbers here around the, identifying what are the costs of turnover within your organization and how much of these costs may be attributed to managers. And so looking at this example here of 200 employees, just a 2% improvement in management would actually yield a savings of $100,000 in turnover costs annually. And so I bring this up just to show that there doesn't have to be a significant, a complete 360 or 180 change within how managers are supporting employees. But what we've seen is, these small improvements in supporting, training, and engaging managers in leadership can have a big impact on employee morale, on them feeling engaged and everything along those lines. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drop in the chat here. If you're interested in actually getting these customized results for your organization, so be able to understand what are these costs for my organization, I've actually put together a report. And so if you'd like to click the link just in the chat here, what I'll do is I'll actually create a customized report based on your organization, based on the numbers that you give me and everything else. And this is just an example of what that report can look like. And then you'll have this information to do with as you please. I've had other HR professionals bring this to their C-suite and say, hey, did you know the cost of turnover in your organization? Do you know like some of these things? And for some of them, it was quite surprising. And so it actually helped empower HR professionals in being able to, identify and share this information with their executive teams. And so feel free to use the link in the chat. More than happy to create this report for you and provide a bit of a debrief. And so what you'll get from it is you can do the online assessment. There's a 15-minute debrief. I'll go over the report with you. I'll send it over to you to be able to utilize. You'll get your own customized leadership development insight report. It'll identify the annual turnover costs as well as the cost per employee. We'll even look at the turnover costs associated with gaps in leadership. And then it'll actually even show some of the areas for growth and the impact of learning and development within your organization. Otherwise, as we close out here, I just want to say thank you very much for taking time in your day to join us. Feel free to follow us primarily on LinkedIn, I would say, is probably the best place. Otherwise, webinars are also uploaded to YouTube, and you can find us on Instagram as well.